Imagine hitting this lush, really warm chord on a vintage electric piano.
Oh yeah, such a classic sound.
Right. Now imagine the producer turning to you and saying, I built that entirely from white noise. Noise as source, filters as instrument, envelope as soul.
Which just sounds completely crazy when you first hear it.
It really does. But welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tearing apart a masterclass from a music production series called The White Noise Chronicles. Specifically, we're looking at episode 3, Spectral Alchemy, which was created by the team at 786 Music.
Yeah, and it's a really rare piece of source material. It somehow manages to bridge this deeply technical software instruction with, well, a pretty profound artistic philosophy about the actual nature of sound itself.
Exactly.
It completely recontextualizes what we usually think of as just, an unwanted byproduct.
And that is our mission for you today. We aren't just looking at a few obscure synthesis tricks here. We are looking at how to fundamentally change your relationship with noise. We're exploring how pure, chaotic, hissing static can literally be sculpted into warm, playable, organic musical instruments. So what does this all mean?
Right, like how do we actually do that?
Yeah, how do we take the abrasive sound of an untuned television and pull a beautiful, soulful piano out of it?
Well, to even begin that journey, we have to look at the motivation first, because it seems deeply counterintuitive. Right?
Oh, 100%.
If your goal is to create a melodic instrument, starting with a chaotic, pitchless signal goes against the standard logic of synthesis. Usually you'd start with a clean sine wave or maybe a sawtooth wave.
Especially today, right? When we have unlimited access to pristine, mathematically perfect digital oscillators,
Exactly.
we spend thousands of dollars on plugins designed specifically to denoise our audio and, give us absolute silence. Yet here is an entire methodology built around starting with the very thing we usually try to eliminate.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that the mathematical perfection of modern digital audio is exactly the problem this technique solves. Because absolute digital silence is unnatural. Human ears didn't evolve in a vacuum. We evolved in a physical world where air is always moving. Things are always vibrating.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So white noise is incredibly powerful because it actually has equal energy across all frequencies simultaneously. It is the ultimate neutral canvas.
Right, it's everything all at once.
Exactly. When you run white noise through a subtractive filter, you aren't artificially injecting character into the signal.
Yeah.
You are simply revealing the character that was already vibrating inside that dense wall of sound.
It's like the classic sculptor analogy, right?
Oh, for sure.
You're staring at a raw block of marble that technically contains every possible statue inside it. The noise has all the potential in the world, and you're just taking your chisel to chip away the frequencies you don't need until the instrument is finally revealed.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And the reason producers want to carve out of that specific chaotic block of marble, rather than starting with a sterile digital wave, brings us back to the French touch movement.
Oh man, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yep. Daft Punk, Cassius Air. The French school of electronic music was historically obsessed with making machines breathe. They leaned completely into the imperfections of their hardware.
Yeah, Thomas Bangalter from Daft Punk talked about this a lot regarding the vintage Roland synths, like the Jupiter 8.
The Jupiter 8 is legendary for that.
Right, because those analog circuits generated a massive amount of self-noise. They hummed, they hissed, they drifted.
And rather than gating that noise out, those producers realized the circuit noise was the glue. It was inseparable from the music.
It really was.
Like when you listen to the massive filtered sweeps in a track like One More Time, a huge percentage of the warmth slamming into your chest is just analog circuit noise being manipulated.
That's wild to think about.
Yeah, the self-noise essentially acts as an acoustic shadow. It anchors the synthetic sound to the physical world.
And the source material focuses heavily on genres like new trash disco, which deliberately use noise to recreate that vintage warmth today.
Yeah, and they aren't just doing it for nostalgia either.
Right. There is a psychological element to it. The source has this incredible line, quote, "Noise is the evidence that music was made by something real. We crave the friction because the friction is the humanity in the machine."
That friction is the core thesis here. In the physical world, nothing vibrates with absolute, unyielding mathematical purity.
Okay, so I buy the theory of wanting that warmth and friction, but I'm kind of struggling to see how you translate that chaotic wall of sound into an actual note.
It sounds impossible at first.
Right, because if you just take white noise and heavily filter it down, wouldn't you just end up with a tiny, thin digital hiss? How does static actively become a playable musical pitch?
Well, that brings us to a process called resonant noise synthesis. The trick isn't just in cutting away frequencies, it's in how you abuse the filter itself.
Okay, abuse the filter. I like the sound of that.
You take your raw white noise and run it through a very narrow bandpass filter. You isolate a tiny slice of the frequency spectrum, but then you crank the filter's resonance aggressively high.
Like pushing it right to the edge of self-oscillation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pushing it until it almost breaks.
Okay, let's untack this because I want to make sure we're getting this right. When you push the resonance that high, the filter starts feeding that specific frequency back into itself over and over.
Yes.
So wait, the white noise itself still doesn't have a pitch? You're essentially weaponizing the noise to aggravate the filter until the filter itself starts to ring at its center frequency?
You've isolated the mechanism perfectly.
Yeah.
The noise is not the pitch. The noise is simply the raw, chaotic energy required to excite the filter into singing.
Wow.
The source material uses the mechanics of a violin to explain this, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah, bow and the string analogy?
Right. When a violinist drags a bow across a string, the bow hair itself doesn't have a pitch. The scraping of the rosin against the string is pure broadband friction. It's noise.
Yeah, just a scratching sound.
Exactly. But that continuous chaotic friction provides the energy to a resonant system, which is the string. The string takes that chaotic energy and vibrates at a highly specific, sustained frequency.
So the white noise is the bow, and our highly resonant digital filter is the string.
You got it.
And this is the literal foundation of physical modeling synthesis, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Like, when developers build those hyper-realistic digital pianos or acoustic guitars, they don't start with sterile waveforms. They start with shaped bursts of noise to simulate the mechanical reality of, you know, a felt hammer hitting a wire or a plectrum plucking a string.
Yeah, it is the only way to trick the human brain into perceiving a physical mechanism that doesn't actually exist in the software.
Theory is cheap, though. Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to see how we actually sit down at a laptop and force digital static to behave like a physical L-atine on a vintage electric piano.
Let's do it.
Because the source material takes us directly into Logic Pro 12's Alchemy synthesizer to do exactly that. They build a Rhodes keyboard completely out of thin air, and hearing the mechanics behind it completely changes how you perceive the sound.
Alchemy is such a powerhouse for this kind of spectral processing. Visually, when you load up pure white noise in its engine, you just see a perfectly flat line across the spectrum.
Right, your uncarved block of marble.
Yep. The first move the instructor makes is applying a steep 12 dB low-pass filter at roughly 1200 hertz with a heavy dose of resonance, about 45%.
So they roll off all that harsh, aggressive, high-end static, leaving just this thick, warm body of sound concentrated in the lower mid-range.
Exactly. But, you know, a continuous warm hiss is still just a hiss. To turn it into a piano, it needs what the instructor calls the soul.
The soul, I love that.
It needs an amplitude envelope that dictates how the volume moves through time. And instead of an instant attack, they program the envelope to have a microscopic delay before the sound reaches its peak volume, setting the attack to 25 milliseconds.
Which is only a fraction of a second, but it completely alters the psychoacoustics.
It changes everything.
Because that tiny delay is the exact amount of time it takes for a mechanical key to engage, lift a felt hammer, and have that hammer travel through the air. You are literally synthesizing the physics of a keystroke.
You really are.
Yeah.
Then they program a decay of 800 milliseconds, a sustain at 35%, and a release of 1.2 seconds. This mimics how a physical body resonates, fades to a resting vibration while you hold the key, and slowly rings out into the room after you let go.
So the envelope provides the physical weight of the instrument.
Right. It gives it that mass.
Okay, we have the warm body and we have the soul. But a Rhodes piano has that iconic bright smack right at the front of the note when the key is struck hard.
Yeah, that bite.
To get that, we have to synthesize the transient strike. So they go back to the filter and assign a pitch modulation envelope to it.
And this is where the illusion really comes together. They add an envelope to the filter cutoff with a plus 30% mod, 0 millisecond attack, and 400 millisecond decay. They're ripping the filter open for a lightning-fast fraction of a second right at the start of the note and then instantly slamming it shut again.
So the moment you hit the key, a bright, sharp burst of high-frequency noise shoots through before the warm body of the note takes over.
Yes, exactly.
It perfectly simulates the harsh strike of metal on metal inside the piano. Finally, you drop it into a virtual room with about 20% reverb and add the secret ingredient for the new trash aesthetic.
Ah, yes. A slow, subtle chorus effect, setting the rate to 0.3 hertz and depth to 15%.
Because the chorus introduces a microscopic analog-style pitch drift.
Right. It detunes the signal just enough to make the digital noise sound like it was recorded onto a slightly warped piece of magnetic tape.
Or played back through a mixing console with aging capacitors that injects the vulnerability. I was imagining sitting at a MIDI controller playing this patch. Because Alchemy has keyboard tracking, meaning the filter cutoff moves up and down the frequency spectrum linearly, depending on which key you press.
Right, it tracks your pitch.
So if you play a low bass note, the filter clamps down and the instrument sounds incredibly dark, muddy, and heavy. But if you hit a chord in the upper octaves, the filter opens wide and you get this bright, shimmering, bell-like harmony.
It's amazing.
You are literally just moving a window of static up and down a keyboard, but your brain is utterly convinced you are playing a physical acoustic instrument.
It's a profound illusion. And the source applies this exact same philosophy to rhythm as well, exploring what they call the new trash disco groove texture.
Yeah, shimmer texture.
Yeah, the shimmer.
This is how you create that hypnotic floating rhythm that glues a dance track together.
The mechanics of the shimmer texture are brilliantly simple. You start with the white noise, but you use a very narrow 12 dB bandpass filter set incredibly high in the frequency spectrum, around 4,000 hertz.
And you push the resonance up to, what, 75%?
Yep, so high that it is almost whistling a pure tone.
But instead of playing it with a keyboard, you assign an LFO to automatically rhythmically sweep that filter up and down in sync with the track's tempo. Like an eighth note sync?
Exactly. Think about the iconic groove in Daft Punk's Around the World.
Oh, yeah.
There is a floating, breathing texture sitting right behind the main guitar hook. It's driving the rhythm, but it doesn't sound like a hi-hat, and it doesn't sound like a synthetic shaker.
It is just a highly resonant window of noise being swept back and forth,
which provides an organic breathing quality that static drum samples simply cannot achieve.
We've built warm acoustic emulations and we've built breathing rhythmic textures, but the deep dive goes even further. We know noise is our chaotic bow. What happens if we use that bow to play something completely digital and unforgivingly perfect, like a pure sine wave?
Well, that opens the door to frequency modulation, or FM synthesis. Traditionally, FM synthesis is the most pristine, mathematically precise form of sound design. You take one clean digital oscillator and use it to modulate the frequency of a second clean digital oscillator.
It's what gave us those crystal clear, almost aggressively sterile electric pianos and bells from the 1980s pop records?
Yeah, very clean. But the instructor asks a brilliant question. What if your carrier is a clean sine wave, but your modulator, your source B, is pure white noise?
Just total chaos.
Exactly. When you force a mathematically perfect wave to be modulated by total chaos, the spectral energy gets distributed in wildly unpredictable ways.
And the character changes violently depending on how hard you push that modulation. Like if you only apply a tiny amount of noise modulation, the pristine sine wave suddenly gets dragged through the dirt. It takes on this gritty metallic edge.
And then if you push it to a medium amount, it warps into a bizarre bell-like tone with irregular sidebands. The instructor points out that this perfectly mimics the sound of vintage Yamaha DX7 drum synthesis.
Oh, wow.
And if you push the modulation to its absolute extreme, the original pitch of the sine wave completely disintegrates. You are left with a totally inharmonic, percussive clang.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because you are using a chaotic source to modulate the signal, the math never repeats exactly the same way twice.
Never.
No two-bell hits or percussive clangs will ever have the exact same harmonic profile.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that unpredictability is the holy grail for modern producers. You are harnessing the aggressive, cutting precision of digital FM synthesis, but injecting it with the unstable, unique character of a malfunctioning piece of vintage hardware.
It's the ultimate fusion of the digital and the physical.
Truly. And if you want to take absolute control over that chaos, the source touches on one final concept that I thought was genius. Advanced spectral shaping.
Yes, this blew my mind.
Up until now, we've been using standard white noise, which is that perfectly flat distribution of energy. But in a tool like Alchemy, You can actually draw your own bespoke amplitude curves before the sound ever hits a filter.
So you are designing your own colored noise profile, tailored for a highly specific purpose. Like, let's say you want to synthesize a hyper-realistic snare drum.
You wouldn't use the block of marble analogy here. It's more like a master luthier selecting the specific density and grain of wood for a guitar body before they even start carving it.
Right. So you go into the spectral editor and draw a massive boost of energy down around 200 hertz to represent the thick, woody resonance of the drum shell.
Yeah.
Then you draw a sharp, violent spike way up at 4,000 hertz to represent the bright crack of the metal snare wires.
You are pre-shaping the raw material. And when you combine that custom-drawn noise profile with 100% key tracking, the filter cutoff follows your MIDI notes linearly.
Meaning you can perfectly tune that incredibly complex, chaotic noise to fit the exact harmonic key of your song. You are literally domesticating the chaos.
It is absolute control over something that is inherently uncontrollable.
It's wild. We started with the most abrasive, unmusical signal in the universe. We carved it down with highly resonant filters. We gave it a physical body using microscopic amplitude delays. We injected the mechanical imperfections of vintage hardware, and we learned how to draw our own custom chaos from scratch.
This raises an important question for anyone looking to integrate these techniques. Are you willing to embrace the friction of the process?
Yeah, because it's not a shortcut.
No. The instructor emphasizes that sculpting instruments from noise is not a preset. It is a meticulous craft that requires immense patience and relentless experimentation.
Right.
And what is thrilling is that 786 Music's next episode takes these exact same subtractive concepts and drops them into the worlds of Afrofuturism and Afro House. It explores a totally different cultural and rhythmic philosophy of how noise functions.
I cannot wait to see how the bow and the string translate into that rhythmic space. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought that stretches a bit outside of your music production software and your plugin folders.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much time and money on tools designed to remove background hiss, eliminate room noise, and put all of our creativity onto a perfectly quantized grid.
Yeah.
We are completely obsessed with creating a frictionless environment.
We really are.
But as this masterclass proves, when you scrub out all the dirt, the unpredictability, and the noise from a sound, you are left with something sterile and lifeless. The soul of the instrument literally lives in the static.
It really does.
So look at your own workflow, your own creative projects, or whatever you are building right now in your life. Are you spending too much time trying to filter out the noise? Are you obsessing over making everything mathematically perfect?
That's a great question.
What if that very friction, that messiness, is actually the secret ingredient? When you delete the friction, you might just be accidentally deleting the humanity right along with it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.